I am a family-friendly console. One that is definitely better than those stupid people at Atari.
Yeah, I am a 16-bit console. Get the heck out of the way, Nintendo. The Sega Genesis has 16-bit arcade graphics and sound, allowing for games like Street Fighter to exist.
Get the frick out of the way. Super Nintendo is the way to go.
Rated PG-13.
In 1983, Nintendo released the Famicom in Japan. In 1985, Nintendo released the NES in America and Europe. In 1989, however, massive competition arose, with Sega creating the first 16-bit home video game console, the Sega Genesis. It had arcade-style graphics, sounds, and a lot more buttons on its controller, allowing for more possibilities with the games. However, Nintendo, of course, had to combat Sega. They, of course, wanted to get out on top in the video game market. The console wars had finally begun. The two consoles in question are the Sega Genesis and Nintendo's competition. Firstly, the Sega Genesis. Now, if you're active on my channel, you'll know that the Sega Genesis is quite a cool console. I just recently got Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on it, and that's a pretty radical game. You have standard 9-pin ports, volume slider, 16-bit graphics, and probably one of the greatest designs for a video game console I've ever seen. But of course, Nintendo wasn't that far behind. Of course, we have a really sleek design with the Genesis, but of course, Nintendo's design wasn't exactly the best. In Japan, it looked really cool, but in America, I don't know, it just looks like a box with some
purple blasphemy on it.
Not exactly sure where they went with the design choice there, but well, let's get straight into the review. Now, obviously, this isn't the best looking video game console, as I said before, but it's a pretty, it's pretty cool. I'm a big fan of the color purple, and it has purple on it. Yeah, so first we have up here the cartridge slot. Now, it's much bigger than the Sega Genesis's cartridge slot. I'll be right back with that one. If we compare the two, the Sega Genesis, yeah, you can see this one's about a span wide, or whatever, how big the span is, and this one much smaller. Here we have your power button, a really loud switch, but if we look in here, it's loud because it has a purpose. It locks the cartridge in place, and I thought that was a really cool design. This very Super Nintendo was my very first vintage video game console that I bought. It's been around for, well, maybe even 20 years now, but I've had it for the past 5, and it has stuck with me ever since, and it's quite amazing. On the bottom, we have all the FCC and everything here. Here on the bottom we have, apparently, this expansion port. Now, I'm not sure that was ever used, but I am aware there was like a Super Nintendo internet service, but, I'm not a genius. I'm pretty sure that was Sega. Yeah, Sega did that with the Genesis. On the back, we have your standard AV, which Nintendo started using their own plug for AV now. Try calling that number. Still not sure. Here's the number. Over here we have RF. This switch for the RF, changing it from channel 1 to channel 2. And here we have the power switch.
You can hear that, right?
A really cool console. I really like this one, but, the Sega Genesis is definitely my sort of thing. Since I'm a Sega fan. That's really all I have to say about that. Let's get into some other stuff. When buying old video games, it's best that you place your cartridges in a place where they won't get dusty. Like a bag. I probably have more Super Nintendo games than I have any other because I've had this console for longer. As you can see, the cartridges are still about the size of an NES cartridge. You know, about as big as my face. But it doesn't matter what the size they are, because at least they're smaller than CDs, which thankfully have been declared vintage. Anyways, let's have a look at some good games. Here I have a multi-cart. It's very light feeling. And it has Tetris and Dr. Mario on it. Which, you know, it's Tetris and Dr. Mario.
Easy.
I'm a big fan of the Star Trek franchise. Here we have Star Trek The Next Generation. The camera's, currently the camera's facial recognition is sensing Data's face, Counselor Troy's face, and Captain Picard's face as actual faces on that cartridge. Here we have Super The Empire Strikes Back. That's like a side scroller. I don't think that one was any good though. The same exact thing went for the Super Return of the Jedi cartridge. You know, those are the Hacker Kings. They're not mine, so I don't really care about those. Next, let's get into racing games. Pushing the 3D capabilities of the Super Nintendo, we have the Mode 7 Super Mario Kart, which was usually bundled with the Super Nintendo, if I remember correctly. If you got the power set, it would include 2 controllers, Super Mario World, which I don't have, in this game, as well as all the plugs you needed, and the console itself. Here we have a game that's a lot like Pole Position, but has a great name. For those of you who are fans of the Grand Tour, and if you didn't know, then you're a dead human being to me. But the Grand Tour actually started out as a British TV show called Top Gear. And this has nothing to do with it. This game is a racing game called Top Gear 2, and it uses a password save state system, which is I still am a really big fan of the password save state system. And I think it's a really cool game. I have never played the first one though, and that's a shame. But the cartridge, this one is in really good nick. I'm glad I got this one. And now let's get into 3D space shooters. Popular on the PC and then ported to the Super Nintendo, we have, well, this one was actually owned by someone before me, by a man named Tommy C. If you're subscribed, or at least if you're watching this, I have your cartridge. So, this one was Wing Commander. This one was like a futuristic, war-riddled world. We're gonna have to actually use this for reference in about 4 seconds, because probably one of the most popular games on the Super Nintendo, besides, you know, Mario World and Mario Kart, is this. None other than Star Fox. Now, Star Fox, as you'll know, like Star Fox Zero, Star Fox Assault, and all those other games that are newer. Yeah, Star Fox is a pretty popular franchise, and I'm glad it still exists. If you don't know what it is, where have you been living? You can see there's like, well, no, you can't see, but this is really a dirty console, but it was $10, and I knew I just had to get it because of that price. Now let's have a look at the contacts. I have Wing Commander right here. The contacts at the bottom, as you can see, are like that, but then the ones for Star Fox have a lot more. The reason for this is that retro video game collectors were speculating about something within Nintendo. So, when the Ultra 64 was announced, Ultra 64 was the code name for Nintendo 64, people heard about an Ultra 64 Mario chip. Now, people had no idea what this was, but they really wanted to wait and see, and they never got an Ultra Mario, or a Mario 64. Mario FX is what it was called. I can't remember things. It was called Mario FX. No one got a Mario FX, but I figured out what it was. So I took my Gambit screwdriver, the special screwdriver used for these types of games, and I opened up Star Fox, and right smack somewhere near the middle of the circuit board was a chip that said Mario FX. Now the Mario FX chip was shown to the public as the Super FX chip. You can see the logo right there. Now what the Super FX chip would do was it would utilize the 16-bit graphics of the Super Nintendo to create 3D polygons, and I am absolutely impressed with what they did there, because that completely blew Sega away. But Sega had their own way to combat this, and they had the Sega Virtua processor, and I personally like that one better because I think it runs smoother. My Star Fox tends to run at 6 frames per second or something like that. I don't know. I prefer Sega. I'm just that kind of guy. Now, there was a really cool accessory that was sold somewhere in the lifespan of the Super Nintendo. Now, this accessory is a lot like a Super Nintendo cartridge. In fact, I think it utilizes the Super FX chip because of the way the contacts are set up. But this, I actually just held it up here. This one is bigger than an actual Super Nintendo cartridge. Now, I really do like this one because it's basically it basically turns your Super Nintendo into a Nintendo Switch. This is the Super Game Boy. You'd plug it into your Super Nintendo, and then you'd plug your Game Boy games into it, and you'd be able to play your Game Boy games on the TV. Why I say it's like a Nintendo Switch is because you're playing your Game Boy games on the TV, and then when you're ready to go out or something, you save your game, pull the Game Boy cartridge out, and then throw it into your Game Boy, and you can play it on the go. I'm a huge fan of this changing from portable to home console concept, and I'm glad that Nintendo brought it back with the Nintendo Switch, and I'm glad the Nintendo Switch actually exists. Sadly, I may never get one. Anywho, let's get straight into the gameplay. Now, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this, but I may have already uploaded the video due to the exporting speed of my video editor, but yeah, you can see here's my bed. There's a lot of junk on it. And then there's a Sega Genesis in the deep, dark, cold. But yeah, it was like an 80s karaoke night, and maybe it got uploaded before this, or after, I'm not sure. Anyways, here's my tripod. We really don't need that crap. I have a new setup. It's all here. It looks very junky over there. Here we have the tube TV I've been playing on, a really cool stereo, but I figured out it only works when you play Don't Stop Believing. And then here we have a really cool sort of semi-flat screen tube TV. Don't get one of these because it doesn't work with the NES Light Zapper, but it's really cool. And also right here, I think this is a FrameMeister, I'm not really sure, but you plug all your consoles into here, and then there are a bunch of buttons where you can, like, choose which console you want. Anyways, that's how I'm going to set my thing up. So here's the Super Nintendo. I plugged it into what I think is a FrameMeister, still not sure. If you hear a ringing, that's the TV. Not sure what's going on there, it just always rings. Whatever with that. You just plug it in, plug in the AV. Right now I'd like to show you the controller. Definitely a combat for the Sega Genesis controller. It has, you know, your standard D-pad, select, start, A and B, but now it also has X and Y and some shoulder buttons, which is pretty standard nowadays, but was amazing back in 1992 when this thing was released. So you're just going to want to plug it in with its PlayStation-style controller port. And now you're going to want to plug in your game. What should we do first? How about Top Gear 2, shall we? This one may not work the first time. I have had a lot of trouble with this cartridge. Alright, let's begin. Hit the power button. I'm a really huge fan of this TV. Let's hit this switch on the FrameMeister thingy. Pay no attention to the dog in the background. And hit the power switch. Doesn't work. Now it's Ocarina of Time. Always be careful when you're blowing on the cartridges. Top Gear 2 is really a pain. Trust me, I've had so much experience with this. Unless it's actually in here that needs blowing. You know, I haven't used it in over a week. This is that 90s soundtrack. I don't know what's going on. Alright guys, I don't know what's going on with the black and white. Let's go with amateur and start. Let's check the controls. Let's go automatic gearbox. And for some reason I'm obsessed with kilometers per hour. Let's try one race. Let's begin. Look at this. That's quite impressive.
Deja vu, I just been in this place before. Higher on the street, and I know it's my time to go. Calling you, and the search is a mystery. Standing on my feet, it's so hard when I'm trying to be me. Whoa, deja vu, I just been in this time before. Higher on the beat, and I know it's a place to.
Get over here. third place. But here it says second. Who can you believe?
Deja vu.
LDGYT right up there. Currently, I'm in third place. And now I can continue later. It's time to go on to our next game of, let's say Mario Kart. Now, let me just say, I main Koopa because he's just the best. Sorry, it's just a thing. And Star Cup, pretty dang good at it. Now, the advertisement for this game said that it had 2 speeds, fast and way too fast. Sorry, but I don't see it. There's also no blue shells, and everyone hates you. I just ran into my own green shell. Also, for some reason, they all have set power-ups. But I mean, come on, it was the 90s. Can't blame them. Yeah, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna play through this, and I'm really gonna speed it up while playing that generic Dr. Robotnik theme. Just stay tuned. Hopefully, the next race will be my favorite. I am a huge fan of this track. For some reason. But only the Super Nintendo version. Nope. But anyways, that was Super Mario Kart. I really wanted that last race to be Rainbow Road. For some reason. Let's have a look at, Star Fox. Alright, so I love this theme. Duh, come on. Oh my gosh, come on. Yep, forget that. Let's test out the Super Game Boy, shall we? Now you have to be aware that the Super Game Boy only works with Game Boy games. It doesn't work with Game Boy Color games. So all you really do is just plug this into the console, then plug your Game Boy game in. Yeah, whatever. That's Super Game Boy. You just play your Game Boy games on the TB. So, what have we learned? Well, we learned that Sega games are definitely better than Nintendo, in my opinion. And that's all I have to say. So, internet peoples, this is a last-minute recording. I am so sorry for this. But, I'm afraid I have to give a few shout-outs to some people. I'm using their Snapchat and Instagram names. So, from Instagram, I have AustinR.18. You can go ahead and follow them. Let me just go ahead and open up Snapchat real quick. This thing will frickin' load. Brian Acerno, and Nick Cooper. Thank you so much all for subscribing to the YouTube channel. If you guys are new, please hit the subscribe button. It'll help me out a huge bunch. Thank you for joining me here today, and I'll see you all in the next video. And remember, when life gives you potatoes, you make potato salad. Throws a cloth over the face cam.